Hi. What you're looking at are two power modules out of NuTone IM4406 Intercom master stations. This one still has the mounting plate attached to it, and this one's had the mounting plate removed. So to make them kind of equal, we're going to go ahead and take this one off so you can see them without the mounting plates. Now this one is missing its large power supply capacitors because I thought it would be easier. This is kind of a parts unit that we've stripped some things off of, but for the purposes of this video, it doesn't make any difference. The idea behind this video came out of a conversation that I had with a fellow named Steven, one of our customers. Steven lives in the Florida Keys. He sent me his NuTone IM4406 master station for repair. His unit had the typical power module failure problems that they have with the overheated voltage regulators and those sort of things. It was a fairly unremarkable repair. We rebuilt the unit, did the work that we normally do on 4406s. It worked fine when we were done, and we shipped it back to him. As he was reinstalling it, he had what I refer to around here as he had mystery wires. He had wires hooked up to the terminal board that didn't go any place that he could identify. He had more wires than he had remote speakers, and he wasn't sure exactly what they were all for because he isn't the original owner of the house. He bought the house 6 or 7 years ago and was trying to figure out what everything was for. He got back the 4406 master station. He had reinstalled it. He had hooked it up and it was playing and everything seemed to be working great. And he was working through the mystery wire issues, trying to figure out what things were about because that's the kind of guy he is. He wants everything to be hooked up correctly and he wants to make sure everything works correctly. And after a short amount of time and with messing around with some of the mystery wires, suddenly all of the sound on the 4406 disappeared. There was no more music, there was no more doorbell, there was no more intercom. The clock was still lit up. So for all intents and purposes, he thought something had gone wrong with it again because that was sort of the condition that it was in when he sent it to me, although it was because of the power module failure thing. And he freaked out just a little bit and immediately sent me 3 emails. I thought it would be best if I called him. After talking to him on the phone for just a little bit and getting things sort of calmed down, tamped down the panic, and start talking about basic troubleshooting and things to do like that, and he was a very handy and reasonable guy to deal with, so he understood what I was trying to accomplish and was more than willing to do pretty much anything that I asked because he was trying to get a system working again. One of the things that occurred to me, which does not come up very often on 4406s, has to do with a feature in how the power modules are built, and that's really what this video is all about. This is not something that comes up very often. For those of you who are watching this who have problems with their 4406s, this is most likely not the problem that you have. This is a rare and obscure thing that can happen. It happens because of installation related problems. It doesn't happen because your system is 25 years old. It doesn't happen because you have a power module failure. It doesn't happen because the painter who is stripping the wallpaper off the wall in your family room dumped a bucket of water into your master station. This happens for a very, very specific reason. So don't look at this as the cure-all and the problem for most common problems. This is that small little 1% of sets might have this problem occur maybe once in their lifespan. This is a rare problem, but it is something that came up and it was easy to fix. I've gone ahead and I've stacked the 2 power modules on top of each other. This one down here is a really early power module, probably from 1996. There is no date code on it. However, there is a serial number on it. It shows its number as 2342. So it's very early on, could very well be first production of 4406s ever. This is a later one, probably from maybe 2002, 2003, something like that. So significantly later. If you look really carefully, there is a subtle difference between the two, which you probably can't find because you're not used to looking at these, and that's kind of unfair. The difference has to do with something in this area and something in this area, and it's hard to see, so now I'll tell you. Down here, and I'll zoom in so you can see, down here is a little yellow device. And up here is a larger flat yellow device on this one. So this is the early yellow device and this is the later yellow device. Here in this even closer up view, you can see the little yellow device right here where the screwdriver is pointing, and here's the larger flat one up here at the top. I sort of twisted it a little bit so you can see it from the face a little better. Both of these devices more or less do the same thing, or perhaps it's better to say they're there for the same reason, but they are completely different types of devices. This one down here, the little yellow one, it looks like a little yellow extra large size grain of rice. This is actually a fuse. It's not your classic like glass fuse that you would replace in a fuse holder. This is a circuit board mounted fuse. It's encased, it's probably an epoxy body or something like that, but it is nevertheless actually a fuse. This one up here is not a fuse. This is what's called a PTC, or sometimes referred to as a PPTC. The way you can look at this one is this is a self-resetting circuit breaker in place of a fuse. When you have a fuse in a device, when the fuse is overloaded, the fuse blows and the device goes dead, shuts off, something stops working because the fuse is blown. When a fuse blows, what do? You have to correct the fault and then you have to replace the fuse because it's blown, and that's what happens. Up here, you can think about this one as this is a self-resetting circuit breaker. This is like the circuit breaker in your home circuit breaker panel. The purpose of both of these devices is to protect the output of the amplifier in the 4406. Because the 4406 had a 30-watt amplifier, which was way more than any amplifier NuTone ever made in Intercom before, and the way you can relate to this is the previous model, which is a 4006, it had a 4.5 watt amplifier. And because 4406s use a fairly traditional output transistor amplifier design, it's a much more robust, much more powerful, discrete circuit design amplifier. There was a need to protect the amplifier in case you had some kind of fault in the wiring in the installation of the system, and those would be the wires that fed the audio output of the amplifier to the speakers throughout the house. The output wires for the music or the radio on a 4406 system are the orange-white wires. So if you had a short in the orange-white wires on your 4406 system, it would be a short across the amplifier inside the master station. It would be very similar if you had a home stereo system and you have one pair of speakers and it's connected to the amplifier with a pair of speaker wires like everybody's had. It would be the equivalent of taking two of the wires out of the back of one of your cabinet speakers while the system is on and twisting them together. And anybody who's ever had a stereo knows that's a really bad idea, because if your stereo amplifier doesn't have some kind of protection circuit built into it, it's going to overload, blow up your amplifier, and the black smoke's going to come out or something like that. So that's very bad. And the more powerful an amplifier is, the greater need there is to protect the output in some way or another. The problem that NuTone created for themselves in the original 4406 is this one down here, is that protection was done with a fuse. And the situation that created was, and yes, I've had service calls like this back in the day when these things were still fairly new and in production, there would be some sort of installation error of some kind or another, and it would overload and blow the fuse in the master station. Since the fuse has to be replaced, that meant that you had to go out to the customer's house, you had to remove the master station. If you were a little bit more capable than average, you probably could do that on the customer's kitchen table or out in the service van. But for most service centers, it meant taking the set back to the shop. If they did component level repair themselves, they could get a replacement fuse, and then you'd have to disassemble the set, remove the blown fuse, put in the new fuse, make sure it works, take it back out to the customer's house, make sure the fault was corrected, otherwise you're going to blow the fuse again, and then put the thing back in. And that was a giant hassle for everybody, and people hated it, and service centers didn't like doing it and having to explain to people why. And even though the set was in warranty, it was an installation problem and people didn't understand, and I thought it had a warranty and was guaranteed for ever, and it was not a good situation. NuTone decided to make a production change during the course of manufacturing, and they respun the circuit board for the power module, and they took out the fuse and they put in what's more commonly referred to as a polyswitch. Here's a close-up of the polyswitch up here, also called a PPTC. Polyswitch is the more common term that everyone uses. And these are really interesting devices. These have been around for a long time. These were actually first invented at Bell Labs in the 1940s. Basically, what this is, inside of here, there's a certain type of crystal material. The crystal material is impregnated with carbon to make it conductive. These work on temperature. So as current flows through this device, it maintains a certain temperature and the crystalline structure stays intact, which makes the carbon conductive. The carbon particles are connected to each other so the current can flow through the carbon and everybody's happy and it all works great. When this device is overloaded, when the current through the device raises up because of a short on the orange-white wire, the crystal material begins to change in its structure. It's a little hard to explain exactly how, but it sort of becomes like glass. And when that happens, it breaks the carbon chain. The carbon particles are no longer connected to each other. So it breaks the circuit so current can't flow through it. And because of that, the resistance of this device goes up. And everybody should understand that a resistive device with current flowing through it is basically a heating element. And so this device becomes hotter, which makes the crystalline structure change more, which makes the carbon bonds break down more, and eventually it loses its conductivity, and that's the same as tripping a circuit breaker in your circuit panel. The current stops flowing through this, so the output to the speakers is broken, and the amplifier won't blow up because the current is not flowing through to the shorted wire anymore. And I promise that's as geeky as we're going to get in this video. Basically, it becomes overloaded, it gets hot, and it trips. The way you reset it is you have to turn the power to the system off. Either disconnect it from the two transformers, or you go to your circuit breaker panel and you shut off that circuit that's powering the intercom so everything cools down. Now, once it's cooled down, the crystalline structure, or the circuit breaker, let's say, will reset itself automatically because the material inside of this goes back to its original consistency and everything works again. However, if you haven't solved the problem with the shorted wires, if the fault has not been corrected, this problem will reoccur over and over and over again. What does this have to do with Stephen in the Florida Keys? Well, what happened in Stephen's case was he did have a short on the audio pair. It had something to do with his mystery wires. I never got a really solid answer as to what all the mystery wires were about, but apparently it was wiring that was either installed for something that had been taken out or something for the future that was never used, or it's a little unclear. But once the fault was found and disconnected, all the mystery wires were disconnected, because I told him, if you don't know where they go and you don't know what they're for and they're not actually doing anything for you, just disconnect them and put them out of the way, because you're eliminating a problem without compromising the rest of your system. And he thought that was a really great idea. During the discussion with him about all of this, it occurred to me that there was a good chance that the reason he lost all the audio on his 4406 was because the polyswitch the circuit breaker had opened. So I told him, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to your circuit breaker panel. I want you to flip off the circuit that powers the 4406. I want you to leave it off while you're disconnecting all the wires, because you need to leave it off for 5-10 minutes, something like that. Sometimes a little longer. It has to do with the ambient temperature of the house and other things that we won't get into. It doesn't matter. Usually 5 or 10 minutes is fine. So turn off the power. Spend the time while it's turned off disconnecting your mystery wires, cut off all the ends of the wires, tuck them up out of the way in the wall housing so they don't touch anything, and then after 10 minutes or so have passed, go back and turn the circuit breaker on and see if the set works again, or see if the system works again. He said, okay, that's what I'll do. And then he calls me back like 20 minutes later and he said, I did all of that, I turned it back on, and everything works perfectly. In his case, what happened was, because of the fault in the wiring, it tripped the circuit breaker and the output of the system went dead. Is this a problem that happens to most people with 4406s that have problems? No. Is this the problem that you probably have with your 4406? No. Is this the catch-all thing that happens and it's the reason why most 4406s people think they need to be sent in for a repair? No. This is the 0.1% problem that happens occasionally. So don't watch this video thinking this is the fix-all for everything wrong with all of your 4406s out there that have problems, because it's not. This is probably only the second or third time I've ever run across a clear case where this was a problem and the solution was relatively straightforward. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up. Wait for it. Thumbs up on YouTube, because that helps us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell, and when you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.